Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a very interesting little knife for you for review, and that's this little guy here. This is the Viper Dan or Don or something number 2. Actually, the Dan stands for Daily Assorted Needs, which is meant for everyday carry, I suppose. And it's a neat knife. It's different, and let's talk a little bit about it. First off, though, I want to thank my buddy William for sending this guy along. He actually donated this to the channel in exchange, so long as that the sale, the money goes to charity, and that's a win-win for everybody involved. I'm always happy to do that. Next thing is that there is a size comparison to be made here, of course. Right here is a Ontario Rat number 2 and Rat number 1, so we can see this is a relatively small knife. Blade comes in under 3 inches. Right here is your Spyderco Delica, because this wouldn't be my channel otherwise. Here is my token slip joint, the Spyderco Roadie, who needs badly to be reviewed. You can see this is markedly bigger than the Roadie. And then my token friction folder, which is this guy right here. This is the Sword Peasant, which has a blade about the same size, although the handle is freaking gigantic. Yeah, there you go. That's the that's the size comparison. One thing to highlight about this knife is that it is a very strange knife in that it looks like a friction folder at some level. It's got this long lever out there, a friction folder being a knife that has no lock, but it's kind of held in place by your hand being on the scales here. So it's got that little piece there, but it's also vaguely like a slip joint, because it has a ball detent system in there that you saw during the disassembly. And so this is sort of a weird mix of those two sorts of things. But anyways, it's non-locking, and that's useful in some places, so there you go. But anyways, let's go into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this particular very interesting little knife. So on the good side, first off, I like the size of it. The blade is under 3 inches, which is a beautiful freaking thing. Overall, it's nice. It's not a big knife. It's not a murdery knife. It's a very beautiful little kind of knife. Beautiful thing. Next thing, the blade stock on this guy is reasonably thin. We are a little bit thicker than the Spyderco Delica, closer to your Rat 1 sort of region, but the way that it's ground with a nice tall grind here means that this will cut. It is relatively thin behind the edge. Beautiful thing. The steel on it is N690, which is one of those steels that's not top of the rock, but it's good to go. Pretty solid. And, the blade itself is a nice shape. It's sort of it's a mix of a sheep's foot and a warty blade. I mean, in some ways, it reminds me of the Insingo blade shape from Chris Reeve knives, although this has a little more point to it and a nice little swedge. So, either way, I like the blade shape. It is a very nice thing. And actually, I should highlight that swedge is very pretty. That's a nice touch, as is the crowning on the top of the blade here. The blade on this knife is very well done. I like it a lot, actually. So that's good. The clip on this guy is interesting in that, see here, it mounts at the top. And what this means is that the clip is symmetrical. You want to flip it around, you just unscrew these and flip it around. Bam, case closed. And so because this is also a friction-y, slippy thing, it is completely ambidextrous. This is just as nice for a lefty as for a righty. And that's something that doesn't happen that often, and I should always comment on. So there you go. And also to highlight, there is a lanyard hole on this guy, but it's very subtle and it's easy to ignore, which for me as a non-lanyard guy is always my goal. Moving along there, the ball detent on this is nice at some level, because it makes sure that the knife isn't going to accidentally pop open. I mean, even if I apply a little pressure to the tab, it's not popping open. And on the closed side, there is actually some resistance to closing. I can knock this guy against the table, and it's not just coming flying shut, as opposed to on a classical friction folder, where that's going to just start closing pretty quickly there. I've got the tension dialed way up, but still. So I do like the ball detent to an extent. It does have a half stop, which means that it stops in the middle and requires yet more force to push out the way. And, yeah. So we'll talk about that part later on, but I do like the existence of a detent at the closed and open positions. That's a nice thing. Next thing, this is a one-hand operable knife. That will make it illegal in some places, but the thing is, it's nice for the rest of us. You can close it using your index finger here, and you can pop it open using your thumb and then your forefinger. Maybe there are other approaches too, but still, that's a nice thing. The fit and finish on the whole is actually pretty good. You don't see gaps around the backspace, so the knife is overall pretty well made. And given that, the price on this guy is something that's fine. They're going for like 115 bucks or something like that. That's 1.5, not 5.0. And, I'm okay with that. I know they're not going to sell a million of these as slip joint sorts of things, and, but still, I think for what they're doing here, that's okay. It's not the king of any value, but you know what? It's fine. I don't mind it. And then finally, I gotta comment, the design on this knife is gorgeous. This is a very, very pretty knife, and particularly with this micarta here. Oh man, I love that it is sort of a burgundy. I mean, you can see the color a little more naturally in other places. This is well used and thus has a fair amount of oil in it, but still, it's a nice, nice color. And there's also a carbon fiber version, which is really, really sharp looking, and not like the blade, but sharp otherwise. And you know, I found that it's attractive enough that a lot of people, even non-knife people, are gonna like this. This is a beautiful design piece, and so I love that very much. And that is in fact the good, that it's got this really pretty design. The price on it is fine, given the fit and finish and the fact they're not going to sell a million of them. It's one-hand openable. It does have a detent at the open and closed position, which is great. It's got a double-sided deep carry clip, so it's fully ambi. The blade on it is nice overall, and the size on it is something I appreciate. Let's talk about what's great here. For me, at least, the greatest part about this knife are the ergonomics. This just locks into my hands. My hands are a little smaller than most, but my God, does this feel great, because you've got this palm swell, and the whole thing is just contoured. The clip goes in the right area. This is a really, really nice knife, ergonomically speaking. I got my complaints, but having this in hand, it's just like, yeah. I mean, you feel this little tab maybe a little bit, but overall, this feels pretty damn good. And so for me, 100% that is what's great about this knife, the ergonomics. It is great in the hand. Let's talk about what's bad. So look, on the bad side, first off, some people are going to complain that there's not a whole bunch of blade inside this handle. I mean, if we look carefully, the blade stops about here, and the rest of this handle is just random handle. You know, it's lanyard hole, it's screws. It kind of makes sense, but at another level, there are going to be people who are going to be bothered by that. Next thing, you're going to think that this is a front flipper. If you are a knife guy and you look at this, you're going to think, oh, wow, cool, front flipper. A front flipper is a knife like this guy where it's built in such a way that you can use your thumb to kind of pop it open there very quickly. But unfortunately, that's not the case here. Not only is the action not anywhere near smooth enough, but it's not designed to do that. So get that out of your mind there pretty quickly. It's not going to work in that way. Next thing, as I mentioned in the disassembly, I feel like the pivot is just really overly complicated. What they have there are two pivot screws that screw into one shaft, which is itself threaded into another shaft, and those two together are separately unscrewed. It feels very overly complex. This is at its real level a very simple knife. I mean, the biggest complication to it is the dual detent balls, which, okay, sure, whatever. But I don't get it, because pivot screw tension is not independent then. I mean, if you tighten or loosen these guys, it still has an effect on the tightness of the action overall. Maybe it's just the micarta pinching on things, but still. So it's not like you've made that go away. That variable is still there. And the tent can be adjusted independently too, so it's not like they need something special for that, so I just don't get it. Maybe it's possible that, I mean, it is absolutely possible that I don't understand how knives work, but the thing is, this one doesn't make sense. If it does make sense to you, if I've just missed the reason for it, let me know in the comments. I'd love to learn. But honestly, this pivot feels like reinventing the jackhammer when all you need is a sharp rock. Then finally, the detent on this guy. Look, I love the fact that the detent is there when you're opening the knife initially or when you close it initially, because it helps to prevent it from shutting accidentally, and it helps it to prevent it from opening accidentally. But the thing is, the half stop is really freaking annoying. Because look, on a conventional slip joint, a half stop makes sense, because if you open the knife part of the way, it'll want to shut itself part of the way. And so if you happen to get it to this point and then keep pushing with your finger there, like if you start pushing here, you want it to stop so you can move your fingers and then have it guillotine shut. But on this knife, that is not an issue. When I get it past the half stop, guess what? It doesn't want to shut. Still doesn't want to shut. Nope. No, you're going to have to push it the rest of the way shut anyways. So effectively, all that this half stop is doing, it has no safety reason. All that it is a big freaking speed bump right in the middle of a flat stretch of road. And it just removes any sense of smoothness in this knife. And it's just deeply freaking annoying, because if you're trying to shut it one-handed, like, okay, this is going to be great. Uh-oh. And so then you either have to kind of power through and then reconfigure things, or as you're trying to pop it open, it's like, I don't quite have the geometry all the time, so I got to slide back in there. It removes any chance of this being flippy. Look, the half stop is a huge pain in my neck, and it drives me crazy. Every time I use the knife, it's just like, oh, that's a defect. And if there were, if I were going to keep this knife, I would absolutely be trying to fill that half stop in with something just to try and make it not a thing. Because, oh, God, is that ugly. But anyways, to me, that is absolutely... To me, it's absolutely ugly. I'm calling it bad just because maybe for somebody somewhere that's a good feature. If it is, tell me in the comments, but oh, God, do I hate that half stop. And so, to me, that is the worst of the bad and probably ugly. I maybe should have put it down there, but whatever. The half stop is just freaking terrible. The design is a little fiddly and overly complicated. It doesn't have enough detent, and it's not going to work for a front flipper, especially because of the damn half stop, and because there's not a lot of blade in the handle. All those things are bad. Let's talk about the ugly here. To me, the ugly thing is that I feel like this is sort of the worst of both worlds between being a slip joint and a friction folder. On a conventional friction folder, you have a nice big lever, like on this Ford Peasant, which means that, not only is it pretty easy to open, but once you have this guy in your hand, and you're gripping the knife, there is no way that this blade is shutting. I can put a bunch of force on there, but the thing is that force just presses this up against my hand, which is gripping down, and there is no concern whatsoever about the knife closing. Similarly, on a well-designed modern slip joint, you will often have a second little area down here, a flat area, a safe area, where you can put your finger and, again, there is not an amount of force I can put on this that will close this knife on my hand. But unfortunately, this guy doesn't offer either of those things. The friction folder tab, although you can press down a little bit with your thumb, isn't really working that hard against your thumb. I mean, it's not like this is keeping the knife closed in a substantial way. And similarly, and on the other side, if this does start to close, all that this is going to do is just close right down onto your finger and start biting into it. I feel like this is sort of... it's giving you misplaced confidence in two ways. The detent isn't strong enough really to work, and the friction folder isn't really strong enough either, and there's no safety down here. So this just is kind of the worst of both worlds. There's no real safety to this knife at all. This is just... I don't know. So, to me at least, whatever the heck that little rant was, that's what's ugly. This just doesn't feel... In fact, this feels less safe than either a friction folder or a well-designed modern slip joint. But, let's go into the final conclusion. Look, final conclusion, this is a very pretty knife. It's a seriously ergonomic knife, and it is reasonably functional. It's got a blade that cuts things, and it feels good in the hand as it does so. And so if you're dealing with unreasonable knife laws that prevent, for instance, locking knives, this is something you might think about. And I know that this knife has a pretty good following as a result of it. But the thing is, even if you're not allowed to carry locking knives, this is not the knife I would send to you, too, because, honestly, it annoyed the holy living crap out of me. I really disliked carrying this knife. And that's not just because it's non-locking. I mean, there are non-locking knives I love. The Spyderco UK-PK is a gem. Because, it's an honest slip joint. It's got the full half style, everything like that. But the thing is, it has that finger choil that keeps things safe and secure. And, a good friction folder can be a good thing because, you know what? Sure, it's a little bit awkward to have that tab hanging out there, but it's functional. It's keeping the knife closed. And the action on it is, as a result, very, very smooth and straightforward. This hybrid thing that it's doing just drove me nuts because you end up with something that inherits the worst of both worlds. You've got the awkward tab and the jerky opening and closing, but it doesn't have the security that a well-designed mechanism on either side that provides, and no matter what, that half stop is ugly. It's like a speed bump at the Indy 500. Why did you have to do this to me? And so, like I said, this just drove me a little bit nuts. So if you're stuck with the kind of legal issues that prevent locking knives, look, like I said, this is an option, and it is a gorgeous option. But I really, really encourage you to look at some of the other options, too. They're not going to be anywhere near as pretty. I will give you that any day of the week. But, oh my God, are they going to be less annoying? And, oh man. So anyways, I am done with this review. I don't have to carry this little guy again. Maybe you'll love it. If you love it, tell me why in the comments. Tell me how you got past that annoyance. Or tell me that you never did. Either way, no gracias. Appreciate the effort there, Dan, but sorry, I'm going to have to move on with my life. Hope this has been interesting to you, though, that this didn't cause too much friction or slip anything out of your joint. That didn't even make sense dislocation humor, I guess. Anyways, mostly though, I hope that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.